It was a chilly morning when Sarah had just finished her cup of coffee and stepped out of her car, ready to face another hectic day in the city. The streets buzzed with the usual rhythm of the metropolis, honking horns, the distant rumble of engines, and people hurrying along the sidewalks. It was a typical Tuesday, or so she thought. Sarah had learned to tune out the noise of the world around her as she made her way down the sidewalk to her office building. But today, something was different. At the corner of Maple Avenue and 3rd Street, where cars swerved in and out of traffic, a small figure darted through the street. An orange tabby cat, its fur matted and dusty from the grime of the road. It wasn't a common sight to see a cat this far into the heart of the busy city, but Sarah's eyes were immediately drawn to the tiny creature. The cat appeared lost, disoriented, and, most troubling of all, aimlessly wandering between speeding cars, its paws skittering across the asphalt in a frantic dance. For a split second, Sarah held her breath. A blue sedan sped past, barely missing the small feline, who let out a startled yowl. Sarah's heart lurched, and her instincts took over. She couldn't just stand by and do nothing. Without thinking, she bolted toward the intersection, her heels clicking loudly against the pavement as she dodged pedestrians and avoided the oncoming vehicles. The cat seemed unaware of the danger it was in, oblivious to the fast-moving cars surrounding it. One car, a large SUV, came dangerously close, the driver honking furiously. Sarah didn't have much time. "Hey, move," she called, her voice urgent, but the cat didn't respond. It only scurried a few steps farther into the street, its tail flicking nervously. A wave of panic surged through her chest. If she didn't act quickly, it could be too late. At the last possible moment, Sarah leapt into the street, dodging an oncoming bike, and sprinted toward the terrified animal. The cat's wide, amber eyes locked with hers for a moment, almost as if it knew she was trying to help. Her hands reached out slowly, as if not to startle it more, and gently scooped it up into her arms. The moment the cat was in her grasp, she felt its tiny body tremble with fear, its fur a mess of knots and dirt. But it didn't scratch or squirm, it simply clung to her, as if sensing safety. Sarah cradled the fragile little creature against her chest, her heart racing from both the adrenaline and the relief of having saved it from certain harm. "You're safe now," she whispered, though the cat remained silent, its fur still damp from the morning dew and the chaos of the road. People around her paused, their eyes wide with surprise, some even applauding the rescue. Sarah didn't even notice. Her focus was solely on the small tabby, which was now calm in her arms but clearly in need of care. The world around her seemed to blur, the honking horns and the noisy city sounds fading into the background as she made her way across the street. She took a deep breath, still holding the cat tightly. The next step was clear: she had to get it to safety, to a place where it could heal. But she wasn't sure where to go, until she remembered the shelter a few blocks away. She could take it there. They would know what to do. The road ahead was uncertain, but for now, Sarah felt a spark of hope as she headed toward the shelter, the cat gently purring in her arms. A new chapter for the lost tabby was about to begin. As Sarah walked briskly toward the shelter, the cat, who had begun to purr softly, seemed to settle into her arms, its tiny body no longer trembling. Sarah couldn't help but feel a connection to the little creature. It was as though they had both shared the same moment of fear and uncertainty. The more she thought about it, the more she realized how much this cat had reminded her of her own life, how, sometimes, things felt like they were spiraling out of control, just as this little cat had been tossed around in the chaos of the busy intersection. And yet, here they were, safe and together. The shelter wasn't far from the intersection. It was a modest building, with bright blue walls that were chipped and faded from years of exposure to the elements. The sign above the door read, "Hope for Paws Shelter." As Sarah approached the door, she heard the familiar jingle of a bell overhead, signaling her arrival. A volunteer, a young woman with short brown hair and a welcoming smile, greeted her as she entered. "Oh my goodness, what happened?" the volunteer asked, her voice filled with concern as she immediately noticed the orange tabby in Sarah's arms. "Is he okay? I found him wandering in the street, right in the middle of the intersection," Sarah explained, her voice still laced with the tension of the moment. "I don't think he belongs to anyone, and he was clearly lost. I'm not sure if he's hurt, but I thought you'd be the best place to take him." The volunteer carefully took the cat from Sarah's arms and placed him gently into a soft, padded crate. "I'll take him back to our intake area," she said. "We'll check him out and make sure he gets the medical attention he needs. Thank you for bringing him here. You've done a good thing." Sarah gave the volunteer a grateful nod, but her heart was still heavy with worry. What if the cat had injuries she hadn't noticed? What if he'd been out on the streets for days, struggling to survive on his own? The thought gnawed at her. She was trying to push the anxiety aside, but it lingered. "His name?" the volunteer asked, her voice more gentle now. I'm not sure. I haven't thought about that yet," Sarah admitted, feeling a bit foolish. The volunteer smiled warmly. "Well, we'll figure that out. We'll take good care of him. You did great by bringing him here." As the volunteer disappeared into the back with the cat, Sarah sat down in the small waiting area of the shelter, the hum of the overhead lights the only sound filling the space. The shelter had an air of kindness about it, a quiet yet reassuring atmosphere that made her feel as though she had made the right choice. She waited there for what felt like hours, though it was only a matter of minutes. After what seemed like no time at all, the volunteer returned, holding the small tabby in her hands. The cat looked a little more relaxed now, though it still appeared wary, as though uncertain of its surroundings. The volunteer set him back down on the counter in front of Sarah. "He's not injured," she reported, smiling. "But he is underweight, and he's definitely been on the streets for a while. We're giving him a quick checkup and some food, and we'll keep him overnight for observation. We'll also give him a little bath to clean up his fur, he's a bit dusty." Sarah let out a relieved sigh. "I'm so glad to hear he's okay. Thank you so much for taking care of him. You did the hard part," the volunteer replied kindly. "Now he's in good hands." Before Sarah could ask more questions, a man in a lab coat entered the room. He had a calm, approachable demeanor, and a clipboard in his hands. He smiled at her. "Hi, I'm Dr. Collins. I'm the vet here. I've been checking over the little guy." He gently stroked the cat's head as it sat on the counter, looking up at him with wide, uncertain eyes. "He's a lucky cat, you know? We see a lot of strays, but it's rare that they make it through traffic like that. He must have some real luck on his side." Sarah smiled at the thought. "I'm just glad I was there to help him." Dr. Collins nodded. "Well, we'll keep him here for a few days and make sure he's properly fed and comfortable. Then, we'll start the process of finding him a forever home. He's definitely a sweet one." The thought of this little creature finding a home filled Sarah with warmth, though she couldn't help but wonder if she was that home. Could she be the one to give him the life he deserved? But now wasn't the time to think about that. For now, the cat was safe. That was the most important thing. Days passed, and Sarah found herself visiting the shelter each afternoon after work. The orange tabby, whom she had affectionately started calling Sunny, after the glimmer of hope he'd sparked in her heart, was settling in well. His fur had been cleaned and was starting to shine again, his appetite had returned, and he no longer seemed quite so frightened of everything around him. Each visit, Sarah spent time with him in the quiet, cozy adoption room, sitting in a chair while Sunny napped in her lap, purring softly. One afternoon, as Sarah arrived at the shelter, she found Dr. Collins standing near the front desk, his face lit with a warm smile. "I'm glad to see you've been spending so much time with him," he said, glancing over at Sunny, who was curled up on his favorite blanket. "He's gotten so comfortable here, but there's something special about the bond you two share. Have you thought about adopting him?" Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She had thought about it often, especially as she watched Sunny grow stronger and more confident. But there were always those questions, her busy lifestyle, her long work hours, her small apartment, and whether or not she could give him the kind of attention he needed. "I've thought about it," Sarah admitted, feeling her chest tighten. I don't know if I'm ready for that kind of commitment. My life is hectic, and I work long hours." Dr. Collins chuckled softly, his tone understanding. "I get it. It's a big decision, and it's not something anyone should take lightly. But I'll tell you this, Sunny is a fighter. He's survived the streets and made it through everything that's been thrown at him. He's looking for a place to call home, somewhere he can feel loved and safe." Sarah looked down at Sunny, who had woken up and was now stretching lazily on the blanket. The sight of him, his orange fur gleaming in the soft light, his big amber eyes filled with trust, struck something deep inside her. It was as if he was waiting for her to make the decision. "Do you think he'd be happy with me?" she asked quietly, almost to herself. Dr. Collins placed a hand on her shoulder, his eyes kind. "I think he's already chosen you, Sarah. He trusts you. He looks at you with the kind of affection that means he's found someone special." The words lingered in her mind as she sat there, her fingers gently stroking Sunny's fur. Could she really give him the home he deserved? Could she be the one to provide him with a loving, stable life? That evening, Sarah went home feeling conflicted, unsure of what to do. She couldn't stop thinking about the cat, about how he had been a part of the chaos in her life, but also how he had brought a strange sense of peace to her heart. It was as if, in saving him, she had also begun to save herself. The next morning, as she sat on her balcony sipping coffee and watching the sun rise over the city, Sarah made a decision. She couldn't let Sunny slip away. She knew that adopting him wouldn't be easy, but she also knew that it would change her life in the best way possible. She had room for him in her heart, and she had the time to make sure he felt loved. That afternoon, Sarah returned to the shelter, her heart pounding in her chest. Dr. Collins greeted her warmly when she walked in, his face lighting up as soon as he saw her. "I've made up my mind," Sarah said, a nervous but excited smile on her face. "I want to adopt Sunny. I want to give him a forever home." Dr. Collins smiled so wide that it seemed to reach his eyes. "That's wonderful news. He's lucky to have you." The paperwork was simple, and within an hour, Sarah was walking out of the shelter with Sunny in a soft carrier, a small tag with his new name on it. Sunny, adopted the 5th of April 2025. She felt an overwhelming sense of joy as she cradled the carrier carefully, the weight of the decision settling into her heart like a warm hug. At home, she prepared everything for Sunny's arrival. She had bought a bed for him, filled with soft blankets, and set up a small corner by the window with a few toys and a scratching post. When she let him out of the carrier, he hesitated for just a moment, before trotting around the apartment, sniffing every corner. His wide, curious eyes explored the new space, but there was no fear in them now. Only trust. From that moment on, life with Sunny was a gentle rhythm of love and care. Sunny followed Sarah around the apartment, curling up next to her on the couch when she watched TV, and gently pawing at her hand when he wanted attention. He was no longer the terrified stray from the busy intersection, he was a member of the family. And Sarah, once so uncertain, found her life filled with the kind of peace she hadn't known she was missing. The frantic pace of her work didn't matter as much when she came home to the sound of Sunny's purring and the comfort of his warm body curled beside her. In rescuing him, she had found her own rescue. The street had been a dangerous place for Sunny, but it had also brought him to her, bringing not just the cat home, but an unexpected joy and connection that would change her life forever. Sunny had found his safe place, and so had she.